back in 2001, it was announced that an ambitious open-world Batman game was in the works exclusively for the GameCube called Batman Dark Tomorrow. It promised to basically be the Batman game everyone dreamt of, freely roaming Gotham City, utilizing the Batmobile, Batplane, and Batboat, and overall just feeling like the Batman. However, throughout development, the team over at Kemco were then thrown the aspect that the game needed to go multi-platform, and it resulted in them changing the game almost entirely. When it released, the game was unanimously panned as one of the worst games in the GameCube and one of the worst superhero games of all time. I took a poll on the YouTube community post, and this was the one the majority wanted to see me tackle first before the other ones that were listed here. So, is Batman Dark Tomorrow a game that is so bad it's good? Or is it truly the Caped Crusader's darkest night? Let's find out. Batman Dark Tomorrow starts with the world's smartest detective gearing up for a night he'll never forget. Heading into Gotham City, he comes across a gang war going on in the streets between Black Mask and the Ventriloquist. However, as he confronts them, he finds out there's more going on here than just their gang war. There's a more elaborate scheme that has the whole world at stake via the Doomsday device, and it's up to Batman to stop it. The story was penned by Scott Peterson, whom worked on a few Batman comic series back in the late 90s and early 2000s, alongside Kenji Terada, whom wrote the storylines for Final Fantasy 1 through 3. And honestly, it's the game's best aspect. The rogues gallery here is impressive, between the iconic villains to much lesser discussed ones, and the overall presentation of the story is just very well done. I mean, the game's intro literally feels like a movie intro, with credits interwoven into the cinematics as the plot unveils, and the awesome theme song that plays. It honestly gets you pumped for what awaits. And what awaits is the gameplay. Dark Tomorrow's gameplay went from the premise of being an open-world experience to a linear third-person stealth action adventure in which the game is viewed almost entirely through fixed camera angles. Quite a downgrade from its ambitious pitch. Immediately, you'll notice right away that the controls are, well, not quite as smooth as you'd like. Batman has full 3D movement, but the game is very physics-based, so there's a weightiness to moving around and jumping. While running through areas, you'll notice the radar on the top right that is very reminiscent of the Metal Gear Solid series. You can press up against walls using the L button, shimmy left and right, and peek around corners to see what's ahead. Additionally, you can sneak walk as well as crouch to get the drop on an enemy who isn't facing you. However, should an enemy see you, you can just beat the crap out of them. Speaking of the combat, you can punch and kick your foes down using the B and Y buttons respectively. Some enemies will go down in a single hit in the beginning, but as you progress, the enemies will naturally get tougher and require more of a beatdown to actually take the hint to stay down. However, you will need to actually go up to each enemy you knock down to use your back cuffs and ensure that they don't get back up. If you don't cuff them, they will get back up and try to take you down again. This can certainly get challenging when there are a ton of enemies in an area looking to gang up on you. You can also do jump kicks, which do even more damage, and you can actually do a backflip pressing both the L and R triggers simultaneously to dodge incoming attacks. You can also run up to enemies and do a running jump kick that dishes out a ton of damage. I always resorted to this method to ensure enemies would fall down quick for me to just cuff them and take them out of the equation. I do like that the final hit that knocks the foe down has a bit more flair to it, giving a sense of satisfaction. Let's take it up a notch though. Presumably you'd think that's all you could do with the combat. However, if you hold down the L trigger while pressing the A or Y buttons repeatedly, Batman can actually do some pretty fast combos on enemies, and it follows up with a stylish pose. The game doesn't teach you this, and that's okay, because you know what was always handy back in the good old days of gaming? Reading the manual. This actually brought me back to the days of learning something new by actually reading through the manual, and to me was actually kind of rewarding. You'll also notice that Batman has 2 health bars technically, the tan bar being his actual health and the blue bar being his armor. If Batman gets shot, the armor will go down, but not his health, at least not immediately. If you stay out of the action for a bit, this actually regenerates slowly. However, if you take too much damage and your health starts going down, you could use medical kits to replenish your health, either manually or keeping it equipped, similar to the rations in Metal Gear Solid. Batman has a variety of gadgets to use, whether it be the Batarang, Bat Cable, Bat Grapple, Universal Tool, Night Vision Goggles, etc. You'll use the D-pad to select a tool and then the X button to actually use it. Batarangs will allow you to go in first person view to lock on and throw at enemies and objects, and typically a standard foe will go down with a single throw. The Bat Cable and Bat Grapple are unnecessarily convoluted at first. Either one would make you think you can swing with it, yet the Bat Grapple can only be shot directly upwards and let you ascend or descend from that point, while the Bat Cable is thrown diagonally, giving you momentum to swing and jump. The Bat Cable controls aren't very good, as you press the C stick back and forth to gain momentum, and then the A button has you flip forward to jump off of the grapple, while the B button has Batman just jump off less stylishly. Not going to lie, pressing the A button to jump off the grapple led to more mistakes or deaths than just pressing the B button to jump off safely. However, there will be moments where you do need to press the A button to get a little extra height. Now, should you die, and you most certainly will in this game, the game will have you load from the start of the room you last entered. When continuing, you can choose a toolkit loadout based on 3 types: offensive, defensive, and stealth. This basically just allocates a certain number of batarangs, smoke grenades, and medical kits to bring in with you. Personally, I found myself using the defensive kit the majority of the time since it provided 400 HP in the medical kit to utilize. Additionally are the boss battles. These are a mixed bag, as most result in just beating down the villain. Some bosses have a little bit more to them, like facing off against Poison Ivy. Her fight is fairly straightforward, but if you find a specific item beforehand, it helps fend off her plants during that fight. Another example is Killer Croc, where if you affect the water supply in Arkham before that fight, he will actually be weaker and move slower. The game provides the sense of actually feeling like a detective, which Batman technically is. Finding files to read or objects to assess will assist in further figuring out clues that may help with what awaits. Connections like this I appreciated, while on the flip side, boss fights with Black Mask and Ubu are straight up beat 'em up fests and feel kind of drawn out. I will say, the final boss fight I thought was very intriguing, and depending on how it goes down will affect the game's ending. There's also a few secret deaths that can actually happen to Batman during boss fights, like Poison Ivy resorting to a fatal insta-kill kiss when she's almost defeated. Throughout the game, you will also find CDs and sketchbooks hidden throughout. Finding CDs will unlock in-game music to listen to within the game's extras menu, while sketchbooks will unlock concept art and renders to check out. You will need to find everything in a single playthrough though, as you cannot replay levels to find the ones you are missing, and accessing the extras requires you to load your save data with whichever unlockables you found. Additionally, in the pause menu is another gallery where you can check out all the characters' models and read their biographies, and it's actually kind of a nice detail to also showcase the character models. So, Batman Dark Tomorrow does have several issues that I do need to address. So, the infamous camera. Yes, the camera is truly as bad as you may have heard, whether back from when the game first released and was discussed in magazines, or in other videos covering this game. If the game had smoothed out the movement controls for all these camera changes, it would have been a lot easier to deal with. The problem is that the camera positions are inconsistent, and sometimes frantically change for no good reason. For example is the boss fight with Black Mask here. This is the first boss fight in the entire game, and I almost rage quit due to how unfair the camera was, leading to numerous deaths. The funny thing was, the further in the game I got, the less issues I had with the camera and the controls. It was almost like the game's camera was at its worst in the beginning and then it slowly got better, but even then, at the end of the day, the game still has a bad camera. I'd actually say the game would have controlled slightly better if it offered optional tank controls, to be very honest. The next issue is the backglider section, in particular, the god-awful collision detection. This sequence already was a bit frustrating to deal with, learning how to combat wind drifts that could make you fall down to your death, but look at these sections where you have to clear the gap here. I mean, it looks like you could easily clear this, but all of a sudden, there's invisible geometry that collides with you, leading to a cheap death. The next aspect is the stealth. The enemy AI and stealth is pretty poor to say the least, and rarely did I ever want to deal with the stealthy approach in this game because of it. Now, on the flip side, here are some common complaints about the game that I actually ended up disagreeing about. One of the segments that gets tarnished is the opening scene where you need to grapple your way through the Gotham rooftops. I'll admit, it's a little bit rough to get through at first, especially for something at the beginning of the game, but overall, it really isn't that bad to get through. Once you learn the physics and mechanics behind it, it is somewhat enjoyable as it feels calculated, which is something that Batman would do, is calculate his moves. Another aspect many despised was the lack of direction on disarming the Doomsday device before the final boss, which determines one of several endings you get. I mean, I get it, but I happened to figure this out on my own and right away thought, there's a red button here. I probably need to do something with this. If anything, it rewards your curiosity, but I was also exploring every room I could. In terms of visuals, Batman Dark Tomorrow is a pretty decent looking game, honestly. Environments look pretty solid, with sharp texture work, while the character models look really good. Batman's design looks great, while his cape animates based on the physics implemented in the game. The Rogue's gallery of characters looks great as well, whether it be Black Mask, Poison Ivy, or the Joker, as well as various others. The game's performance does reside with an unlocked frame rate, where it sits at the 30 frames per second mark most of the time, and it occasionally hits the 60 frames mark. It all depends on the size of the room you're exploring and how many enemies or objects are active in that location. In terms of the actual animations, yeah, some of it is quite laughable. The way Batman just plops to the ground immediately after taking a hit just looks hilariously dumb, and the game further emphasizes that across boss battles when both the boss and Batman fall on the ground with each hit and the camera zooms in on them. In some ways, it reminded me of the open your mouth scene from Kung Pao. There's also the laughable aspect that when Batman runs downstairs, he actually has no animation to run down the stairs, so he just drops down each step. Yeah, that's kind of funny actually. Despite the issues here and there visually though, it's really not a terrible looking game by any means. On the audio side, the game's main theme is superb, feeling very cinematic thanks to the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra lending their chops here. The in-game music is solid too, with the music fitting the tone of the game, whether you're being stealthy or exploring or entering combat and the guards are alerted. It does sound a bit odd though when the audio just immediately cuts when a trigger event happens, like getting spotted or when the combat ends, and it's not a smooth transition, but rather a hard silent drop in music, almost like Red Book audio. Sound effects do a solid job as well, whether during combat, the gadgets in use, the ambiance, or just all the audio cues when accessing the Batcomputer. While Kevin Conroy did not voice Batman here, Julian Fletcher took on the role and does a great job, honestly. As a matter of fact, the voice acting across the board is very well done. Now, I want to highlight the differences between the GameCube and Xbox version for this game. The GameCube version was the primary platform developed by the original team at Kemco, while the Xbox version was ported by HotGen Studios. However, the Xbox version is devoid of any collectibles to attain, so there are no CDs or sketchbooks to find, leaving many of the side rooms utterly useless to explore. Additionally, the Xbox version looks far less natural visually, with numerous visual effects missing and a worse frame rate. On top of that, some of the animations are gone as well, and numerous aspects seem like the game is running on turbo mode and looks really bad. To make matters worse, the game sounds heavily compressed on the Xbox. This is odd considering that the Xbox utilizes the DVD format, which is roughly 3 times the storage space of that of a GameCube optical disc. Something like even the rain in the opening rooftop segment sounds crisp and atmospheric on the GameCube, while the Xbox version just sounds so muffled. Funny enough is the game over motif. On the GameCube, the theme just plays once and then it goes silent, which makes sense. On the Xbox, the motif plays over and over again and legit sounds like a broken record, but then I did multiple game overs again afterwards just to see, and it happened every single time. Another aspect to note is that many of the game's camera angles are entirely different, some slightly better and some far worse. Even some of the geometry is different, with the opening alleyway battle segment being in this tiny space on the Xbox versus the GameCube having a more open space. Adding on to all this is the collision detection for the combat feeling far worse and less responsive. For example, I'm fighting this one thug here and it's not even responding that I'm actually kicking him. On the GameCube, I never had this kind of issue. I don't normally highlight these aspects between platforms in a review, but I came across rumblings that there were differences, and upon some research and trying it out for myself, yeah, it's pretty shocking. It almost made me wonder if the version the critics reviewed back in the day was primarily for the Xbox instead of the GameCube version. Batman Dark Tomorrow is a game that could have been polished quite a bit, no question. The controls are stiff, the camera is atrocious, and the mechanics overall are rough. Yet, despite those heavy issues, there's no denying that I wanted to keep sticking with this game till the very end. I won't sit here and say that every Batman fan needs to play this, but I will say it's nowhere near the worst Batman game. Batman Forever on the Genesis and Super Nintendo and Batman and Robin on the PS1 easily take that trophy hands down. It's also nowhere near as bad as Superman 64. I even went back to replay the game a second time now that I knew the mechanics better, and I did find myself a little bit more entertained the second time around. In the end, it's a heavily flawed Batman game, yes, but you could do so much worse on the GameCube.